All right, it's great to be beyond the bye week. I know the bye week came at a good time for us, but we're all here to coach and play football. So to get back into game week, we're excited. Great opportunity to continue to move our team forward. Cal Poly is a team that I think we've seen real improvement. We didn't play them last year, and credit to Coach Wolf and their staff for continue to take the steps. They've been awfully competitive in the conference season to this point. They've been on the road a whole bunch. They've only played home 2 out of 7 games, so I'm sure they're excited to get home. But an opportunity for us again to see where we can go. I think that's the biggest thing. We used the bye week well. Healed some guys up, but for the most part, just really had the guys say, what do we need to do to get better individually, and then collectively as a team. I think we made those steps. We got out and did a little bit of recruiting. I think everybody came out of the week pretty well charged up this morning. So excited about it. I know in Cal Poly, you're looking at again their conference season in particular. They've started fast. That's been the most maybe impressive thing. They've got themselves in position to be awfully competitive. They won at Sacramento, lost a close game against Davis, and then until that thing got away from them at the end in Missoula, they were right there. They've played a couple quarterbacks, and I think that's something that has probably been challenging for them. I think their intention is to play Diefenbach, the redshirt freshman transfer from Pittsburgh, but they've also been able to go back to Bo Kelly, who's been, it seems like he's been around for a while, and both played in the Montana game, so I would anticipate that they'll go with the order of business, but I know we got to be ready for both of them. They certainly have one of the better receivers in the league in Briscoe, and then defensively, I think that's just where you see continual improvement. They've been real steady on that side of the ball, and they've created problems for teams at the same time. So with that, I'll open it up, and again, excited for the new challenge in front of us.
Having a game in California for the first time in a couple years, I know it's one of the states that you guys prioritize. Just how great is it for some guys to come home and some people to see you guys back in California?
Yeah, the way when we're going to transition out of the scheduling model, but we've been able to play in California every year. So those guys from that state to get a chance to play closer to home, whether it's in San Luis Obispo, Davis, or Sacramento, I think is something that in recruiting was advantageous to them. We have guys from kind of all over the state, more southern than northern, so this is the most southern of the 3 stops. So I know, it's exciting for them, and as the conference continues to transition more south with the addition of Utah Tech and Southern Utah, there's a couple more games that are closer to home too. You lose Sacramento, but you gain 2 that are down that way. So I know for them, not only getting a chance to play back closer to home, but then I'm sure play some guys they grew up playing against is exciting.
Now that you guys have the bye week to kind of reflect, I guess specifically for the secondary, how much have they grown since the beginning of the season, and kind of what were the biggest takeaways from the Idaho State game?
Yeah, I think a significant growth. In 7 games in now, I think it's an experienced group where we started the season with, I think, a group that we saw as talented but very inexperienced. And that Idaho State game, was going to be a challenge. They were going to be able to do some things. I know they hit the one long touchdown that really wasn't the secondary's fault. We were supposed to be underneath that route a little bit better from a linebacker perspective. They hit a couple more, but I thought they kept their heads about them. We eliminated the run game and made them one-dimensional. I thought we rushed the passer pretty well, sped his clock up quite a bit. The number of times he had to throw the ball away, reflected in that more than, obviously the sack numbers. But, I think it's a group that's continuing to gain confidence. And also just a pretty resilient group. I think that's the one thing you worry about when you got younger players is just how much will they carry one play to the next. And I think our coaches have done a really good job of those guys living in the present, being able to correct mistakes, move on from success at the same time.
Speaking of the secondary, Tim Thomas played a good amount, especially early in that game. What's kind of been the biggest reasons why he's been getting more playing time?
Well, with Taki being down, Tim gained some traction. Obviously, as of late, but it was more happened through that first month. He was actually on the scout team a little bit, but Taki, going down created an opportunity for us to continue to look at Tim. And then with JJ going down and not being available at Northern Arizona, again, more opportunity for him. And I think now we're positioned where Tim's played in 4 games. I think we'll move ahead and just keep playing him at this rate to get him more involved with special teams. So it was opportunity. It was Tim taking advantage of the opportunities, mostly on the practice field, to again gain his coaching staff gain confidence in him. And he had a couple plays in that game that went against him, but I think that's part of growing. He had the penalty and then the scramble touchdown. The guy got away from him, but I think we see a lot of ability and a pretty good maturity about him. So I think we'll continue to see more and more of Tim as we go along.
And with Taki, do you have any update on what his status is?
Well, I want to see how this week goes. He's kind of right in the sweet spot for return to activity. Does return to activity allow for him to return to play? I think we'll have to see how this week plays out. He's going to be on the plane either way, so we can continue to utilize this full week. But I think he's worked real hard. But again, this stretch, the return to activity and return to play, and how long that transitions, we'll just have to see as the week goes along.
I guess speaking of that, any other updates on the injury front?
Yeah, we're really very healthy. Looking at our team, I know Hunter Providence was available but didn't play. I think an extra week off for him has been good. Otherwise, we didn't really pick anything up new in that week that's going to keep anybody out this week. So, Taki's return, I guess, is yet to be determined. But otherwise, considering we're 7 games in, we're pretty dang healthy.
And then you being named to the D1 rules subcommittee, just any comments on that?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I know Aaron Best has represented our conference for quite some time, and I said Coach Tom Wistersill, Commissioner Wistersill, reached out to me back in August to just see, gauge my interest. I think Aaron's done his time. I guess he's served his term. So I think our game is ever changing, and the rules, the adjustments, continue to need to be made from year to year. So to be a part of those discussions will be an interesting opportunity, and I know one that I don't take lightly. I think the coaches who represent our profession and hold up the game, it's a very important task. And Coach Bull, who I worked with for quite some time, is the executive director of the AFCA, and I know that's from his position on down. Those that get an opportunity to serve on committees, it's very important.
Was there anything, you mentioned Coach Best kind of being at the end of his, was there anything else about the timing that you especially like to join it now?
No, I don't know why exactly Tom asked me, but he did, and I obliged.
And then the indoor practice facility, I know you guys have been kind of in and out of there the last few weeks. Just how was that?
It's been great. Yeah, I think the intention of that facility is year round, but as we're getting past mid-October here, and we're certainly in the fall, winter's around the corner. I think to be able to utilize it potentially on a daily basis, we've been in there out of need on a couple cases where we had rain, and we've mixed up our use based on just wanting to start in there. We start really early on Tuesdays and Thursdays, starting before 7 a.m. essentially. So to even start our walkthroughs and our stretch and our individual work in there has been really beneficial. So yeah, we're in a different place as far as just our ability to prep and kind of be both in and out, and we're still going to play outside in this weather. So our a lot of our work will still be outside no matter what. But a week like this where we're going down to California and going to be playing in at game time maybe in the 70s, and it'll creep down in the 60s to be inside a little bit. I think is helpful.
With Neil coming back last week, what can you kind of just say about the depth of the linebacker room and now kind of that 3-man rotation with Cole
Yeah, and it's really still getting five guys some time. So, I think Neil, getting him back, he certainly flashed on that one short yardage play in particular. I think, Bryce has continued to elevate his game. Cole, I think the same thing every week. He's getting a little bit better. So in those three, maybe if you call those the three primary rotators, I think we have a really good group. And then the continued growth of Ryan Correa and Xavier has been critical. So I think it allows Coach Owens to challenge those guys first and foremost, that we have guys that can play 5 for 2 spots. Don't assume anything, and certainly from a health perspective, if one guy were to go down, I think we feel much differently now than we did when he went down back at Oregon. So, the progress of that group, maybe different than the secondary, but has really, it's been a great thing for this team.
With Cal Poly's offense, I know you've faced teams that have multiple quarterbacks before, but just with Diefenbach and Kelly, I guess, what have you kind of seen from those two this season?
Yeah. Well, I'd say this. We saw Diefenbach against San Diego, and I was really impressed. You're just watching him on the other team as we're preparing to play San Diego, and so much so where did this guy come from? Then you see that he was a transfer and all that, and he threw the ball really well that day, ran around. Then you get back into looking at them this week, and you see that he went down against SFA. They ultimately go to Kelly. They had another guy in between that they went to initially in that game. I thought Kelly really played well against Sac State and UC Davis. 2 games, they won one, and they were highly competitive against Davis. And they go back to Diefenbach against Montana, and they end up playing in both. So I'm sure it's a kind of an unsettled position for them a little bit. I think they both bring different things to the table. You got a 6'6" kid that can throw it around, but still pretty athletic in Diefenbach. And then, Kelly's 6 foot, has played a bunch, has been a backup, but has played a bunch in his time there. And, I would say more of a run around guy than a drop back guy. So 2 different styles. I don't know that their offense, is quite different between the both of them, but their strengths are certainly different. So I think that's one thing you got to look at. If they both end up playing, how does that adjust their offense when one is in over the other? And I would assume again that we're going to see Diefenbach, but who knows? I think we've got to be ready to play both and defend them both, and know that they got good receivers they're throwing to. They got a couple good backs, and it's maybe as much about who else is out there than just the quarterbacks.
And then defensively, I guess we've seen on that side, especially keeping them in some of these conference games recently too.
Yeah, they fly around. They play really hard. I think they've been disruptive up front, and they've had guys kind of in and out there. I know based on injury. Their 2 linebackers lead them in tackling, and those guys are very active. They're sideline to sideline. They're pressure guys. I think they've had some injuries in the secondary as well. So I would imagine the bye week will do them well too. You saw a little bit different team out there the last time than maybe the previous 2 games, just based on injury. So, but impressed. I think they've definitely taken a step forward since we saw them last, which was a couple years ago, and it starts with just being sound and playing hard, and then the guys believing in what you're doing. And it appears that they've taken some real strides in that regard.
During the bye week, kind of in the middle of the season, have a chance to sort of reflect. What do you think about the team sort of gradually progressing each week? Like on the field, players that was something you set out for practice today, and not being like an up and down team, but just continually winning and getting better each week.
Well, it becomes more evident when you sit at home on a Saturday and watch college football. You see it firsthand. The head scratchers, I guess. Teams that are supposed to perform a certain way and don't, and teams that maybe aren't supposed to perform a certain way do, and you just don't want to ride that wave. These opportunities to play a college football game are minimal. You're playing once a week. You want to be able to pour everything you can into it. You want to show up with a consistent team, an improving team each week. And I think we've done that certainly through the conference season now. And now the charge is to continue to do that, to go on the road after a bye week, to utilize that bye week to get better. So no, I think it was a comment based on just observations from Saturday, just getting a chance to probably pay attention to the college game a little bit more than you do on a normal Saturday, other than just maybe looking at scores. You actually watch games and see how teams are performing. And I think you could say some has to do with parity maybe at the highest level, but I think a lot has to do with what is everybody's approach. So we're after a consistent approach. We're after improvement. And I think we've been able to see that, and I think we have a hungry team that still realizes its best is out there, and we got to keep that thought process the same way. We've done more than scratch the surface, but we got a ways to go, and we have not arrived by any means. And to keep chasing whatever that means, we got to stay after it on these days out on the practice field in particular.
Coach, going against Idaho State a couple weeks ago, another good receiving core. Just how much confidence does this secondary have going into this Cal Poly game against another good receiving core in Briscoe and the supporting cast?
Yeah, I think that's a game that certainly builds your confidence, because they were challenged, and we mixed up coverage. We were really, for the most part, really assignment sound in that game. With the secondary in particular, I know. They made a couple plays, but what we've continued to do, over the course of this season is really limit the big explosive plays. I know we gave up one huge one in that game, but that was it. That was their last scoring play. That cut that game to 20-14, and there could have been a lot of cause for panic in that moment. But I think guys recognized that. Okay, what was our flaw in that particular play? That was a really good player that made that play. Both ends, quarterback to receiver, and let's go out and keep fighting. The fact that we turned them over 3 times. I know the one was at the end of the half, but Carson's strip fumble is evident of a guy that is just playing, and that was going to be a big play for them, and it turns out to be a hustle big play for us. So I think. Our secondary, just like this team, recognizes it's continuing to improve, but it has so much more out there, and the guys are staying in that mindset of being hungry, and our coaches are continuing to coach them, and our guys are allowing themselves to be coached. I think that's the key piece to it all.
Now that we're kind of a handful of months post revenue sharing, house settlement, I'm just curious if there's any results of that you've seen, anything that's changed maybe just since that went down.
Well, I think you have that, plus the adjustment in the transfer portal now that's been around for a few weeks now, I guess. I think time will tell what that means. So the two worlds still colliding, and what that all means for player movement is something that will continue to happen, but will it happen differently because the timing will be a little bit different as we go into November and December, and the portal technically not opening till January 2nd. Will there be, I don't know, just a tempered way it kind of happens this year? It might. It's still going to be their movement is, and I know. Will the highest level payrolls be as high? I don't know. I mean, I know pre-July 1st, a lot of people were able to unload a lot of money, and that doesn't affect what we did by any means, but there's a trickle down that happens. So will some of that be, again, tempered would be the word I would use, I suppose, but I don't know. I think ultimately is a more competitive game at the highest level. Is that what you're seeing? The ability for programs, I think Indiana and Vanderbilt in particular, to jump up and do what they're doing is a product of our new world. And how much it's affecting our level, I think that comes more in the turnover that we're seeing or adapting to, I guess. I don't think at our level anybody's significant investment is showing up, or it's whether you can tell that or not, I guess. So I'd say time will tell. I think at the highest level, there's no doubt the financial component has changed the balance of power a little bit, or how you can get the power. But at our level, it's I think it's still we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and just having the NIL in house, that's something you were happy about. Is it gone kind of is been relieving, I guess, as you?
Yeah, and I think we're still a little bit in a work in progress here, with our collective still living outside, with our foundation taking on a greater role, us coming together entirely probably at the end of this fiscal year. So no, it's been positive for sure. I don't know that it's where it's going to be though. I guess ask me another year. I think I'd have a better sense for where that's at.
With Rocky, obviously, I know receiver to tight end isn't a huge shift, but I guess anything he can maybe take from his receiving experience in high school that he has kind of brought to the tight end position.
Oh, I think for sure. I think the things he was able to do as a dedicated receiver, running routes, body position, adjusting the football. I think those are all things that you could see were pretty natural to him. His play on the basketball court, I think, translates as well. I think, not that we were concerned, but his bigger transition was going to be the inline blocking and how physical he could be, and he was playing safety on the other side, so it wasn't like he was playing defensive end or something, but he was physical as a safety. So I think we made a pretty educated guess that okay, he's going to be able to translate. There's certainly some things he's going to be able to take with him, and he can figure out the rest. And I think he's done that. I think to have the success he's had into his redshirt freshman year, I think it's not a complete shock, but we're very excited about it at the same time. He's extremely competitive and talented at the same time. So you put those two things together, this is what can happen.
I know you mentioned the blocking there too. I know he's mentioned it, Jordan mentioned it. Just how do you feel like he's grown kind of in that aspect? I know he's found the end zone, but just as a blocker as well.
No, I think he's been good. He whatever he's put on, it's been probably close to 30 pounds. And that's just not weight. That's a lot of strength and being athletic and being able to bend his knees and snap his hips, all those things I think were there. It's just okay, the strength and the weight would have to come, and there's still a lot out there for him, but he's worked really hard, and again, that's something that we were more than hopeful. I think we counted on he was going to work really hard. He was going to become something along the way. It's probably happening maybe as fast as it could have, not faster than we thought it might, but as fast as it could have, and we're really pleased with what he's done so far.
Coulter, what's on your mind?
Hi, Coach. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You mentioned just the progressive consistency. From just a mental perspective, how much focus does that take for a collective group?
Well, that's certainly one of our key words. So key themes is focus, and let's put intense focus in front of that. The word intense. I think it's something we got to work at. I think we got to be reminded of it on a pretty daily basis. Whether it's in the meeting room, being locked in, if it's in the weight room, being dialed in. Certainly on the practice field, because you got to just show up on game day and think you're going to all of a sudden be this focused version of yourself. It doesn't work that way. So I think really challenging this group over and over again about what that means within their position groups, but then even themselves being able to hold each other accountable, and really clearly living in the moment. It requires all of that. So it's something that we talk about quite often, and I think a lot of it's reminding, I guess, but I think our guys understand that without focus, we are going to ride this wave that we just can't afford to ride.
You mentioned just watching other college football, and it's so true how much there seems like there's so much parity, and I wonder if there's so much hype that goes into that too, right? Like you get overhyped, you start believing your own hype. You guys are one of the most hyped teams in the FCS, but you guys seem to be able to manage that well. So how do you go about doing that element of it? How important is that to you as the leader?
Yeah, I guess don't read anything you guys write or put on TV. That's where you got to start. No, I don't know. I think you value what you can be versus what everybody's saying you are. I think when you're a competitive group, you know that how you'll be judged comes at the end of the road. It doesn't come in the midst of it. And I think that's, there's a constant reminder there too. Beginning of last week before we played Idaho State, I said, guys, we have not arrived. So if any of you think we arrived by going down to Flagstaff and winning that game, we have not arrived. So I think I think we got a group that, again, I said it before today, it's very coachable, and they want to be coached, and they want to become their best. And, that's a constant battle to have them think that way. It's something you hopefully in recruiting, you find guys that, are super competitive, see that, what they are now is a far cry from what they can become. And we are not perfect in that regard, but I think for the most part, we have this group of really hungry guys that they don't believe the hype, I guess. And maybe with our youth, there's a group of guys that's naive too, that doesn't even, I don't know, haven't been around long enough to even know what that means. So, no, I think we got a really good group of older guys that have learned more and more how to be vocal and how to get guys, maybe how to recognize when guys are getting out of their element a little bit too. So, the credit goes all over the place. I think, Coach Heron in that weight room on a daily basis, our older guys on a daily basis, our position coaches, everybody kind of thinking and speaking the same language.
Now, Molly, the center of their defense seems like a really strong point. The D tackles, their inside linebackers. So how much does that pop out to you on the field?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it starts with their front, and they're able to roll some guys through there. But they got some really good individuals in that group. I think their ability to mix up fronts, I think, is part of it. Their willingness to be pretty aggressive with their numbers, and play some man-to-man coverage and play some zero coverage, at times. I think that's all part of it. They move well, I think, and are coordinated and sound within that movement up front. I talked about their linebackers. Those guys are very active, and I know Mikey Diamato was with us for a brief time in the summer, so he's found his way and is leading them in tackles. So it definitely starts with that core, but then it extends to their ability to be aggressive because they think they can cover on the outside too. I think it goes hand in hand. So we've gotten better at handling movement, I think, through the course of the season, of identifying, and being on the same page up front. And they're definitely going to challenge that on Saturday.
Diamato particularly, what do you think he does well?
I think we saw him as a strong safety, so we saw him as a guy going back a couple years that could run well, that was physical, very physical. And, like for him making the transitional linebacker over the course of time here doesn't surprise me. That might have been something, had he been here, that would have happened. But he's just, and he was a really smart, intelligent player too. And again, he was only here for a couple weeks in the summer, so it's not like we saw it all. But I think in that short time, he made an impression, and he chose to take his route to junior college and all that. But physical, smart, can run, all those ingredients for a really good linebacker.
You mentioned Diefenbach and Kelly and some of the other receivers, but I want to ask you specifically about Briscoe. He seems like, first of all, one of the best guys I've seen in the league, but also just a guy that's a little bit different than some of the other guys too. So what do you think makes him stand out?
Yeah, you just statistically 30 catches, 7 touchdowns just there. I think the next guy maybe has 19. So he's a guy they're targeting. He can run. He's got good size. He's 6'2", 200 plus, I know, and I think good body control. So all the types of things they do in their passing game, whether it is more of the play action down the field shot, he can be on that end, trying to match him up on the inside or on a fade. Their screen game to the receivers, I think, is very effective. And it's not, they don't all just go to him, but when they do go to him, he can catch it and go. and doesn't miss out on too many opportunities. I think that's the thing. He catches the ball well, and he's not quite as big as the last two guys we saw at Idaho State, but he's of that bigger type that you better be ready to go physically when you match up with him.
And I just talked to Titan, but he was talking about the gelling of the offensive line, and I know that's something you've been talking about for weeks, but it seems like that they are now, a cohesive unit that has 7 or 8 games underneath their belt. So, can you just talk about that part of your football team?
Yeah, there was just a lot of new there, and talent and experience, but a lot of new, and that's really everybody, with the exception of Burke, who wasn't there at the beginning. Burke's the only one playing the spot he played last year of the returners. So that was going to take some time, whether it's the technique of Titan moving inside. I think that's been an adjustment for him that I think he feels like, okay, he's kind of taken that step now. Certainly JT snapping the ball and what that means and directing everything. Cedric moving to the other side and what that means being on the right side versus the left. Certainly Braden learning to play, where he's still probably giving up some weight, but is that, using his athleticism, using his length consistently. And then, I think the adjustment of what it means to play next to a particular guy or two guys, and how that can vary, and just who has to be the communicator, how that communication goes. You're working double teams. How does that work with one guy, over another? And then all that being said, you're being coached by a new guy that, I think it's been really good, but that in itself is an adjustment. So I think the new is gone. We're 7 games in, but the new was there, and it did take some time for everything to, I would say, come together to gel, like you said. So there's still some out in front of us, though. At the same time, we're not, we've not hit our peak there, but I think we've continued to play better and better, and given our backs better opportunities as the season has went along, protected our quarterback better, and at the same time, I think that group knows that there's better out in front of them too.
That's one for me. Just having 2 of your captains as anchors of that offensive line, how much has that just helped be a steady force as they grow?
No, I think that's important. It doesn't happen every year where you have a captain that's an offensive lineman. So to have 1 and now 2, I think is important. I think that group, it's got the most guys for one. So your reach is different in that regard. But I think the level of respect a veteran lineman can command. The hard work, the dirty work. All those things, the selflessness I think an old lineman possesses just by nature. I think that's really important. And then you sheer size, you got a couple of the bigger dudes that are your leaders. I think that matters too. And I think both JT and Titan have gone through so much to get here. I think their ability to talk to younger players, guys going through injuries. I think both of their willingness to express their appreciation for where they're at in their careers, being here. I think those 2 are pretty weathered as far as their experience here, and I think their willingness to speak to that, and again their appreciation for being in this position. I think that's so critical to what they're able to bring to this team.